Back to follow segment tonight. On Friday, there will be more than 28,000 security people spread out all across Washington, D.C. Reason for that massive display is protesters, some of whom are promising unlawful conduct. Joining us now from Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent who actually protected President Obama during the 2009 inauguration. Mr. Bongino, let's start with a general question. Security on Inauguration Day is a very difficult process, correct? But on Friday, it's probably going to be the most difficult because we have so many people coming in to protest.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. I mean, this is the Super Bowl for both federal, state, and local law enforcement officials. Area. I mean, anyone who has a gun and a shield and has law enforcement power is going to touch this event somehow. And one more thing to keep in mind, Bill, with the inauguration, you still have a major city to police in Washington, D.C. So, yes, this is the Super Bowl of security, and it's a big, big deal for the Secret Service.
All right, tell us about your experience with President Obama. What was your role, and what did you do?
I was in charge of the 3-block area. I see what you're playing now, the footage of Barack Obama out waving. That was my zone. In conjunction with a Washington field office agent, I was responsible for developing the tactical plan, the medical plan, the chem biological plan, a mitigation plan for explosives, all of that in that 3-block area. And for obvious reasons, that 3-block area was very sensitive because he was out of the car. I mean, that car is like a rolling tank, and when he's going to get out and wave, all of your senses have to be on high alert. You have to have a 360-degree sphere of protection following him everywhere. And it took a really, really long time to plan. I mean, we're talking years here, soup to nuts, Bill.
Do you get people out of the buildings? Because Trump and Pence are going to walk, so they say, after the speech back. And so there's buildings, that flanking Pennsylvania Avenue and the other streets they're going to use. Do you evacuate everybody out of the building?
Yeah, that's a good question. A few people have asked me that today. No, what they do is they cordon off the entire area, not just Pennsylvania Avenue, but the parallel streets out. And what we do is we put up really large fencing, 7, 8 feet tall. So anybody who comes into that zone, into the buildings, whatever, if you go into that building, you are going to be screened for explosives, for metal, for weapons, for any kind of ammunition, anything. So the way they do it is they clean the area out. You clean it, you sweep it for explosives and weapons to make sure there's nothing planted there in advance, and then you post it with agents, and anybody who comes back in has to be clean. So clean, sweep, and post, and then the buildings, you don't have to worry about it at that point because anyone in that zone is clean.
So in the morning of the inauguration, anyone entering the buildings will be searched.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Bill, you're not getting anywhere near that zone. Anywhere within weapons range of the president, soon-to-be President Trump and Vice President Pence, excuse me, you're getting nowhere near them without going through a metal detector. Okay. There's no chance of that happening.
So the security agents, Secret Service, are there right now as we speak. They're there on the parade route, all right? What are they doing now?
Right now, they're walking down the street, and they're worried right now about what I call, the big six, right? You're walking down the street, you're taking the path President-elect Trump is going to take, and you're looking for tactical threats. Where can people hide, pop out of buildings with Kalashnikov rifles and hit us? You're looking for medical emergency evacuation routes. God forbid he has a heart attack. How do you get him out of here? 250,000 people? How are we going to get through the crowd? Where can you hide explosives? Where are the airborne threats? Are there drones? Can you fly a drone off a building? Is there a threat from Reagan Airport? Finally, you're looking for other things. Is there piping underneath the street that could burst? Is there potential for a fire? Those are your big six threats, and they're walking down that street right now and going through those buildings, thinking of an A to Z plan to mitigate all of those big six threats.
So they're sweeping the route. They're looking underground. They're looking above ground. They're doing all of these things. There's one final thing. The terrorist weapon of choice now in Europe seems to be trucks and vehicles smashing through, exploding, and all of that. How do you stop that?
Yeah, this is a really big deal. We're taking the New York City model. The NYPD has used this model for years at the UN. You just get a bunch of big trucks. You fill them with really heavy things like sand. I mean, and really, they're immovable objects. So you can drive a truck into the event, but you're just going to hit another truck. You're not going to hit anyone else.
You line them up in certain strategic points so that nobody could get through that. a barrier, like.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And if you need an ingress or egress route, you just slant them so you can't get a high-speed access route. You have to make like a slalom. So there's no way to get in at high speed.
All right, Mr. Bongino, thank you for your service. We appreciate it, and it was an excellent segment. Plenty more ahead as the Factor moves along this evening. We'll talk with two conservative entertainers, Scott Baio and Joe Piscopo, about whether they feel threatened in the current environment. And later, Gutfeld and McGurk have some thoughts about protesting the inauguration. We hope you stay tuned for those reports.
As a Democratic elected official, but as a elected official who represents the United States of America.
What did they say back? Not naming names. I hate him. I can't go. I can't.
They just said they don't. You know, they're not going to participate. They don't think it's legitimate. But that's the point.
They think it's good politics for their side, playing to their face.
And I think it's bad. I also, you know what? I also think it's bad politics. By the way, not just this is. First of all, I think it's the right thing to do to show up. I also think it's bad politics because you pointed this out. Take the moral high ground. At least show that you're going to participate in this transfer of power, and then go ahead and trash them on policy. There'll be plenty of opportunities. Tomorrow is not the opportunity to do that.
That's one of the things Peter King was saying yesterday, right? You know, he said, by being there, you kind of sit there and you say, guess what? I'm here. You're here. I'm going to fight you every step of the way, but I'm in this game with you.
Exactly right.
He also said that in order to get there, they're warning them, you know, he's got to leave his house at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it's going to be a huge pain in the neck. I wonder how many representatives are like, I'm going to skip this. I'm going to make a political statement. It's also going to be a heck of a lot easier to stay home.
You know, it's interesting to see the way the president-elect himself has reacted to this. In an interview on Fox News with Ainsley Earhart, he sort of brushed it off with humor. And he said, well, I hope that we get their tickets because we need more tickets.
Yeah.
As we do see him landing in Washington. Washington. We're about 24 hours away from his swearing in, taking the oath to be the 45th president. Megan?
Yeah, two quick things. I can always be counted on to bring this to the cynical place. A lot of these low-level Congress people, this is a great way to get publicity. A lot of people that aren't on cable news that often, this is a great way to get their name out, let their base know that they're going to be a hardcore partisan hack for their entire Trump administration. Some of these people, I don't really, I mean, I've heard of them, but I'm not totally familiar with their careers. No offense to any of your friends, Julie.
You've heard of some of these, I'm sure, but yeah.
Some of them are pretty low-level Congress people that don't get a lot of publicity that often. And if you're joining this, 68 people, maybe you're going to be part of some weird band of brothers that's just never going to give the other side a chance to speak at all. When watching Donald Trump's plane land right now, you can't help but think of when he came down the stairs at Trump Tower,
the escalator,
blocks away, and what a joke it was to so many people who did not take it seriously, who continued to not take him seriously,
including people in our profession.
And I keep thinking of what I read yesterday, that he in 2012, when Romney lost, the day after, trademarked "Make America Great Again." So you've got to give it up to the brilliance of this man that took a long time for me to come around to as well, and that he definitely saw a vacuum in this country, a group of people who weren't being spoken for, who felt abandoned by the Obama administration. And I'm curious to see how history will reflect on this. Yeah. And will there be any game change-esque nasty books written on this? Because this has been a very open campaign, an open election season that have been widely reported on.
Imagine how much more outrage there would be in the press if 68 Republican congressmen decided to boycott Barack Obama's inauguration in 2009. It would be the issue, and it hasn't been that way in terms of the coverage of this.
And by the way, just some stats on those 68 Democrats that will not be attending. 16 of them are from California. House Democrats skipping the inauguration are from 26 different states. 66% of those not attending are from states that Clinton won.
I mean, it's interesting to watch this. You brought up the escalator moment, because I think that's something that we can all remember. I remember where I was at that moment, because Melania came down the escalator and looked fantastic. That's what struck me. I can say that as a woman. But 99.9% of people who watched that never thought we would see this day. One of the few is, I think, Melania herself, who said, oh, no, she didn't want him to run because she thought he would win. And she knew how much it would change their lives. I saw that in an interview, which is interesting.
For some of us, this is still very surreal, watching a plane with the United States of America on it and Donald Trump sitting in it.
You'll notice the difference here. This is not Donald Trump's private plane anymore.
Right.
This is a military plane that has landed at Joint Base Andrews, Washington, D.C. one day, almost 24 hours to the minute before Donald J. Trump will be sworn in as our 45th president. This is an amazing shot that we've got right here. You are looking at this plane landing live with the president-elect. We'll watch for him to walk out of that plane, but what a moment in history, Megan.
Yeah, and his first dance is going to be to "I Did It My Way" by Frank Sinatra, and what a more fitting song I certainly couldn't come up with.
Well,
and you know what I will say, the real silver lining for me in all of this is the cleansing it's been for all the political strategists, especially in the Republican Party, and I could name a few, but I don't want to get in trouble on television, who really have no business running campaigns and working on campaigns anymore, just taking a bunch of money from vulnerable candidates and then blowing it and not being able to go anywhere. And those people, luckily, I doubt they will have a future or career in politics. And I like that it has been, like I said, cleansing is really the right word. A lot of people for a long time that I particularly thought were, quite frankly, hacks. And I'm glad that they're not going to be working on campaigns
and
in 2020
as you look
anymore.
At the countdown clock, Howie, less than 24 hours to go until the swearing in. Things that we know. Chief Justice John Roberts will be administering the oath tomorrow. As Mr. Trump will be resting his hand, as we now know, on two different Bibles. One he's had since childhood that his mother gave him, and the Lincoln Bible. But one thing we haven't talked about is that we know that there's going to be hundreds of thousands of people there at the inauguration, but there will be many protests happening as well.
And it wouldn't be a Trump show if there weren't protesters and a march and all of that. I mean, Donald Trump, people forget, ran against the Republican establishment as much as he did running against the Democrats. He had never been in politics before. I mean, we now are starting to take this for granted, but it's remarkable what he pulled off. And yet, at the same time, there are people who, not just in the Democratic Party, who are having trouble coming to grips with the fact that he is going to be the president for the next 4 years.
The door is open. We are all watching this together.
You okay, Julie?
The president-elect.
You gave me some hope because you mentioned My Way, and I'm thinking about the first couple lyrics, alas, the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. I'm not sure that's the message that Donald Trump wants to convey with his first dance, but, you know.
The stairs have pulled up, and we will be watching for Donald Trump to be walking off that plane any moment now. Melissa.
I think, you know, one of the things that strikes me about this is that is refreshing about it is that it is so different, and it does signal such change in the sense that all the polls were wrong. Somebody won who shouldn't have. Someone got in who didn't have any experience. And for me, as somebody who's watched as the process has become so sealed in those who have been there before, and if you don't know people and you don't have a campaign apparatus up and running, you have no chance, and there's no point in voting because the polls tell you the day before who's going to win. All of that was debunked in this election. And as somebody who's on the younger side, that's refreshing because it makes you feel like you do have a voice. You should go vote. The polls that tell you the day before who's going to win aren't always right. The person who has the last name that's been in politics forever isn't always going to win. You know, that there's a chance for change. You may not like how this turned out, but it was unpredictable. And that unpredictability is really refreshing for people who've watched politics for a long time and don't like knowing the ending before it even starts.
Speaking of those polls, President-elect Trump now attacking again rigged polls.
Let's keep our eye on here because the door's just open.
I'll
A very exciting moment indeed. A busy schedule for the president-elect will begin tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. There will be a private prayer service held at St. John's Episcopal Church. The president-elect and his family will attend that religious service, but he is gearing up for what is going to be a very exciting next 24 hours. Of course, he will be sworn in at noon tomorrow. This plane took off. This is a military plane carrying the president-elect and his family. Took off from LaGuardia Airport just a short time ago in the 11 o'clock Eastern Time hour. It is now landed in Washington at Joint Base Andrews, and we are watching for the president-elect to emerge any moment.
There's Barron, right?
Spokesman Sean Spicer indicating this morning that the president will give a philosophical speech.
So right away you saw Barron exit the plane. Donald Trump Jr. has exited the plane with some of his children. Of course, he's got 5 children. There's his wife as well. Eric Trump seems to be following directly behind with his wife, Lara. And there appears to be Ivanka Trump with her youngest baby that she had just last year in 2016. Of course, Jared Kushner, her husband, following directly behind. There is Tiffany, Donald Trump's youngest of his 4 children. And more continue to emerge.
Is that Marion Barry Trump, his sister, who sits on, I believe, the 3rd Circuit Court of Appeals and is a federal judge and very well respected? I think that's who that is.
And of course, we are waiting for the president-elect, Donald J. Trump, to emerge himself. But what a moment, 12:16 p.m. Eastern Time, and he has arrived just ahead of the big day, Inauguration Day, taking place tomorrow.
You know, for all the buildup, as I watch the plane, United States of America, and he's about to come out, it really does sink in a way that it hasn't so far, that we're about to have a new president, unlike any president.
As I sit next to Joy Roginski, a staunch Democrat, did you ever see the day?
You know, it's not, well, for me, I did not have this reaction, I must admit, when George Bush became president. I certainly would not have had it, I believe, if John McCain had become president or Mitt Romney. This is something very different for me, not just because of my political affiliation, but I think because of the individual who's about to take office.
If you're just tuning in, we are waiting for the president-elect to emerge from that military plane. It has just landed in Washington. Ahead of tomorrow's inauguration, his family has already exited the plane. We have not yet seen the president-elect.
This is a pause for dramatic effect. Every showman knows how to do.
Is this Melania?
Ooh,
this is Melania.
New First Lady.
The soon-to-be First Lady, and there he is. President-elect Donald J. Trump has arrived in Washington. Just one day ahead of its inauguration, you are looking at the soon-to-be 45th president of the United States. I mean, who just said it?
I was 22 or 23 when Obama was elected, and it sounds naive, but I never thought it would end. I thought I would have to deal with Obama forever. And anyone other than Obama exiting that plane is a great morning for me right now.
And he is receiving the formal military salute as he lands and walks down the stairs and arrives in Washington alongside his wife, Melania. And such a busy schedule will get underway. The first festivities begin tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time.
A lot of people will be watching the tone of the inaugural speech. Sean Spicer saying it'll be a more philosophical speech rather than an agenda-driven speech, because Donald Trump has had such a contentious transition, and that's by design. He is somebody who won the nomination, won the election by fighting and by fighting back. And so a lot of Americans will be tuning in, of course, to see what he has to say to the nation at noon tomorrow.
Well, you know, and it was an amazing sight just over an hour ago when he left New York City. People were lining the streets in Midtown Manhattan just to see him drive off to LaGuardia Airport.
And New Yorkers don't usually do that for anybody.
No, it's true.
Some of us are happy to just have 57th Street back, you know.
It's true.
Yeah.
And he is now in the vehicle, and it begins. We've got the countdown clock, as you can see, and that is a countdown clock to his swearing in. That will take place at noon Eastern time tomorrow. Donald J. Trump has arrived in Washington ahead of the inauguration tomorrow. Yeah. Julie, you're oddly silent.
I'm not silent. You know, I'm taking it in. I have to say, this is actually, it's not a joke or said for effect. This is, in some ways, this has made it much more real for me. I don't know about the rest of you, but again, not from a partisan perspective, but to see Donald Trump, who most of us had known in a very different capacity than as a senator or a congressman, an elected official, to emerge out of a plane that says United States of America on it, I think just made it that much more real visually, if a picture speaks 1,000 words or whatever other cliche could come
And all
up with.
this while his transition process.
Yeah.
Some say it's going quite well. His camp says that, but there has been some scrutiny, and obviously hearings taking place on Capitol Hill today. Steve Mnuchin, the nominee he has chosen for Treasury Secretary, he's being grilled.
Yeah.
But all of this as that process continues.
It does, and Democrats are fighting tooth and nail, probably setting the tone for what things are going to be like going forward, which makes sense. I mean, that's what they feel like they're going to have to do. It's different than what we saw in 2008. You know, there were many more confirmations at this point in time, but that's sort of the tone that we might see going forward. I would say, obviously, policy and America and all those other things come first. And on a completely frivolous note, as we sit here, it was fun to watch Michelle Obama's fashion through the past 8 years. I mean, she had a lot of style. It's going to be interesting to see Melania's style. That coat, very sharp and fantastic. You know, can we say that?
Yeah, can I actually just say this to my fellow liberals out there? I think some of the opprobrium that Michelle Obama got over the last 8 years from some people was uncalled for. And I hope my side leaves Melania Trump alone and doesn't do that to her, because I think Melania Trump did not ask for this, certainly does not seem that she's craving it. I think would prefer to stay in New York if all else were equal. And whatever else happens with her husband, I really hope that we cut her a break and don't make her into some sort of meme that I think Michelle Obama was for the right, including some of the lovely tweets that I get every day about Michelle Obama that are very uncalled for.
Well, not only...
Can I curtail on that? I hope people let the Obama daughters be teenagers. There's already some things that have happened on the internet in the past year and a half, which I have completely come to Sasha and Malia's defense. They're going to make mistakes. This is the era of the cameras on every phone, cameras everywhere. They're young women, and I hope the media continues to go easy on their children as well.
Well, you know, I mean, that's one of the things about the internet. Every news organization that I've worked for, I have been told, you know, that the families, the wives and the children, the first spouse and the children are off limits, that these are not people that volunteered for this job, and you cannot, you know, make fun of them, be mean, any of that sort of thing. But obviously in the age of the internet, people are going to say a lot of mean things, and not every organization operates by those principles.
About to go to college, they're young girls. I feel for them. People are ruthless.
All right, well, 24 hours ahead of thousands of people expected to fill the National Mall, Donald Trump, the president-elect, has landed in Washington after taking off from New York City just a short time ago. We saw his entire family come off of that plane, pretty much, children, grandchildren, and he was the last to come off with the First Lady, the soon-to-be First Lady, Melania Trump. And the festivities will shortly begin.
I'm sorry, but could you just imagine being Melania Trump from Slovenia, an immigrant who came here not as a child like I did, but as basically as an adult, and the transformation to go from basically being somebody who came here without any support or any family to now be the First Lady of the United States. That must be an amazing, amazing feeling.
Only our second foreign-born First Lady, and of course she's remaining for at least for a few months back in Trump Tower. I think this president, you know, most politicians, the White House is the nicest place they'll ever live. This president will also be spending a lot of time back here in New York at Trump Tower and at Mar-a-Lago.
And Howie, I know this is something that you report on and have been following a lot. But the president-elect has different plans for this inauguration. He's going to be attending less balls, say, than it was compared to Bill Clinton, who attended very many.
14,
the president-elect, he says he's going to be attending 3 balls. The parade, some presidents have had hours-long, 4-hour-long parades. His is intended to be 90 minutes. He plans to get right to work.
Well, Donald Trump has consulted with the former reality show producer Mark Barnett on how to produce this show, and it is a show made for television, and so I think it is more of a stripped-down inauguration, a little less of the festivities, and at the same time, you know, a lot of celebrities have gotten a lot of ink by saying they're not going to go and entertain there, but that's part of the culture war that seems to surround the incoming 45th president.
Yeah, day one, he said, I mean, my day one is going to be Monday because I don't want to be signing and get it mixed up with lots of celebration, says the president-elect. And here you go. There's reality TV for you. We have got cameras following the motorcade that has just left that military plane that transported the president-elect and his entire family, as we saw. Donald Trump Jr., Eric, Ivanka, Tiffany, his youngest, the First Lady, the incoming First Lady, was aboard that plane. Grandchildren, you saw Donald Trump Jr.'s grandchildren get off the plane. They have arrived. The Trumps have arrived.
Isn't it interesting that one of the things that was out there swirling, I mean, you mentioned the reality show producer that they said was going to come out and produce this event, and for a day or two there was all that hoopla about, oh, is he going to take a helicopter, you know, from the Capitol over, and this is serious, you know, it's not about a reality show, it's not, and the media spent a bunch of time spinning about all that stuff, which ended up not being even remotely
Okay, so something we know about where he is going, there's cameras right now on both sides of 11th Street. Trump is expected to arrive off the Pennsylvania Avenue entrance into the Trump Hotel for the afternoon's luncheon. So that is expected to happen shortly. Police have cleared the front hotel entrance for of pedestrians, I should say.
What struck me in watching the family come off that plane is that they have been very much part of this campaign. I mean, Don Jr., Eric, Ivanka, you know, very important advisors to their father, the president-elect, and of course, Ivanka's husband, real estate developer Jared Kushner, actually going to be taking a job in the administration. And so this, just as the Trump organization, the real estate company, the golf courses, the hotels, was sort of a family affair, to an interesting degree, the presidency is going to be operated that way as well. These are important people in the new president's life.
And even so many young children coming down that stairway, and those are kids that we've seen all along who are going to be at things and be involved. I mean, we have little kids. It makes me a little nervous.
Not everybody on the couch.
I
don't have children.
in the sense that I can't always guarantee how mine are going to behave, and that is just to see those kids come down the stairs. That would be the thing I would be thinking about most. How am I going to behave? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, my son would be flipping that staircase.
So the event that he's going to be attending right away will be a leadership luncheon at the Trump International Hotel. So they are en route right now. We'll be following that every step of the way. But President-elect Donald Trump has arrived in Washington 24 hours ahead of his swearing in. We've got more pictures coming up now. As promised, there are cameras on 11th Street there awaiting the president-elect's arrival. Not huge crowds in that camera shot, but we are told that police, and this is in front of the Trump Hotel, police have already cleared the scene awaiting their arrival. So we should see them arrive shortly. And of course, tomorrow, it's unbelievable when you look at the schedule. Inauguration Day, get ready. 8:30 a.m. It begins with prayer, a prayer service at St. John's Episcopal Church. Coffee date at the White House. The swearing-in ceremony, how he begins at 11:30 a.m. and around noon, the oath of office and the inaugural address will take place.
What's so fascinating to me is that Donald Trump won this election by breaking every rule in the book, by flouting all the conventions of politics. Indeed, he'd never been in politics. But now you see him becoming part of this larger American pageantry and tapestry where you have the rituals and the lunch and the ride with the former president to the Capitol and giving the inaugural speech. And it really is a moment for him personally, for the country, as the guy who was the ultimate outsider becomes a powerful insider.
You know, you bring up an excellent point. I can't remember being as interested in an inaugural speech as I am in this one tomorrow, because I think we knew what to expect from whether it was George Bush or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. But what do you expect from Donald Trump, and what kind of tone is he going to take? Because he is so unpredictable. And you're hoping, or at least I'm hoping, that whatever the tone is, it sets the tone. It's not going to set the tone for his administration, because I think he varies with the wind, but at least we'll set the tone for the first couple of weeks. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure if he claims he wrote it himself. I don't know if that's the case. Usually they have a lot of help. But whether it does appeal to our better angels, or whether he persists in taking the tone that he has in recent months of I won and you better fall in line, and it'll be interesting to see what he does. You said philosophical. I'm curious to see whether it's a John Locke philosophy or Thomas Hobbes, or a Hobbes philosophy where life is dark, cruel, and then we die, essentially.
I think it will be similar to the tone that he took at 3 a.m. on the night that he won the presidency, calling for unity and reaching out. Now, when he starts work Monday morning, I mean, it's not that he's not going to be prepared to take on his detractors and his opponents, not just in the Democratic Party, but perhaps in the House GOP as well. But I think for this speech, for this moment, Donald Trump is savvy enough to know that he now needs to project an image of being the president for all Americans.
All right, what a moment. As you just saw on the left-hand side of your screen, we were showing you the soon-to-be First Lady, Melania Trump, alongside the president-elect landing in Washington. That happened just a few moments ago. Now the motorcade is en route to the Trump Hotel in Washington. Police, as you can see, Secret Service have already blocked off the streets there. They are awaiting their arrival. The entire family, as you saw, for Donald Trump's 4 oldest children, also his youngest son, Barron, getting off the plane, as well as some of his grandchildren. They are on their way for the festivities to begin. There will be a leadership luncheon taking place in just a short time. But this is such a moment in history. And Melissa, it's amazing when we look back covering Donald Trump from a business perspective for so long. What a moment to see Donald Trump entering the White House.
It's really true. I mean, I remember the day that he announced, and we were in our show meeting for my show, and we were talking about our rundown, and we said, well, Donald Trump's going to come out at some point, and he's going to announce he's not running, so we'll get a soundbite from that and we'll use it later on. And he came out and he said he was running, and we're like, oh, that's interesting. But as he started talking, the whole thing sort of gathered steam, and he kept talking, and you realize that he was dead serious about this, and that it wasn't, as before we always thought of it as kind of a publicity thing, where he talked about being in politics because it was a great way to kind of get airtime and promote his other businesses, but underneath it all, he was about his shows and marketing. And I never really had the sense that he was that serious about politics. Then he came out and he said this, and he said he was running, and we kind of stood around the newsroom and looked at each other, and here we are now. I mean, it's just interesting in that time that's gone by to remember that date specifically.
And as we let off the show with these now 68 House Democrats that say they will not be attending the inaugural ceremonies, Julie, you want this to be a moment where we all come together and unite. And unfortunately, that is the headline, is that these Democrats will be sitting this one out.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that's the headline. I think the headline will be President Trump takes office. But I think it is a missed opportunity. And again, Melissa mentioned him coming down the escalator. I laughed it off and thought it was a joke. I remember saying to people, yeah, okay, wait until they ask him to release his taxes. He'll never do that. Well, he didn't, and he still got elected. I mean, every step of the way, including this very moment when I saw the United States of America on the side of a plane with a reality show star touching down, is surreal to me. But having said that, he is now about to become the President of the United States. And partisan politics aside, that office is larger than partisan politics, and he's the leader of our republic. And so we owe it to him tomorrow on his inauguration day for members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to show up, to send a message to other countries that may not wish us well, that are not democracies, that, in fact, we are a democracy that supports peaceful transfer of power, and we are a democracy that respects the office of the President of the United States, even if you don't respect the man occupying it. And I think that's a missed opportunity. I think a lot of Democrats have said, well, I don't respect him. His views are illegitimate, therefore he's illegitimate.
And while President Barack Obama said he wouldn't comment on those 68 House Democrats not attending, he said, I'll be there, Michelle will be there, and of course we know that Hillary and Bill Clinton will be there.
Right. And George H.W. Bush, unfortunately, not able to go, and I guess is being hospitalized, but seems to be stabilized. You know, it's a small but symbolic thing. When I saw the president get out of that plane, I realized the next time we see him board a plane, he'll be giving the salute to the military people on duty there, and that will be a little reminder that he's now in charge of the United States Armed Forces. So, you know, there is all of this weight and the gravity of the office that descends on anyone, no matter how confident, no matter how successful in life, when they become the president. Trump hasn't really shown any great strain, and of course he's still on Twitter attacking people or responding to attacks, which often the press misses. I don't know if he will change that, but you know, in a heartbeat, we will use the president, and we'll be referring to Donald J. Trump, and that will take a little bit of getting used to.
And you just referenced President George H.W. Bush, and of course his wife had been our thoughts and prayers.
Yes.
As their medical conditions have taken a toll this week. We just got an update on the Bushes. This is the official word. President Bush had a good night's rest and remains in stable condition in the ICU at Houston Methodist Hospital. His medical team is actively evaluating him, and we are hopeful he will be discharged from the ICU in a few days. He was admitted yesterday, as we know, and diagnosed with a case of bronchitis. Mrs. Bush reports she feels, thankfully, 1,000% better this morning. Antibiotics and some good rest seem to have restored her to better health. So they have received a lot of friends have been visiting them. They're reporting, and that is the official release coming from the Bush family.
You know, Howie, I'm glad you mentioned Hillary Clinton, because that's actually a very good data point for why I think these Democrats should show up. Hillary Clinton is showing up tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, my goodness, can you imagine how painful this is going to be for her to be there tomorrow? And yet she's showing up as the former First Lady, and she's standing up there with her husband, the former president. And I think if she can do it, certainly these 60-something Democrats can do it, because she understands, or at least her presence will demonstrate, that tomorrow is larger.
And by the way, the case of bronchitis was Mrs. Bush. Right. It was a matter of pneumonia for Mr. Bush. But of course, she's saying she's 1,000% better, so that's very nice to be able to report that today.
One of the things that was on our rundown is what will happen as of tomorrow to former President Barack Obama, and he indicated at his final news conference that when he is moved on an important issue that he's going to speak out. I happen to think that that's entirely appropriate for a former president. George W. Bush was different. He really went back to Texas, took up painting, and decided to stay out of the political spotlight. He had had his 8 years. That was enough. You don't, as a former president, want to be second-guessing your successor every other day. But I think...
In theory.
In theory. And if you do that, you probably pay a political price. But I don't think there's anything wrong with a former president weighing in.
They're not even leaving Washington, though. I mean, they're living down the street from Ivanka, and
But that's because of their daughter finishing high school.
They're still not leaving D.C. I don't know. I feel
you want him gone.
I think that he will start criticizing President Trump within a few weeks. I think he can't control himself. I think this has always been sort of, you know, because he was so contentious during the election that, you know, Donald Trump is a lot more famous than President Obama is. He sort of beat him at his own game, turning the White House into a celebrity contest. It all started with President Obama, and I think he will be bitter and critical and all over television, and the exact polar opposite of the graciousness that George W. Bush showed President Obama.
Can I just say, in the New York Times, having a little bit of fun with this, I don't know if they realized they did this or not. You would hope they did. They said in farewell, Obama sets red lines that would pull him back in. So when he would make a comment.
Where does that phrase is very familiar?
I know, the red line in Syria. Well, yeah, so I don't know if the New York Times was having a little bit of fun with that headline, but they're saying that he made it clear on Wednesday that he finds some ideas advanced by President-elect Donald J. Trump so alarming, he laid out markers that would draw him back into the fray. I don't know if you know, his markers in the past that he's laid down, he have not drawn him back in when he said he would come back in, but I have a sense that this time it will.
A lot of Republicans and conservatives that have had a very contentious and, you know, extremely draining last 8 years watching what our country has become, especially in regards to what President Obama did, completely weakening our country in every single aspect in regards to foreign policy. It is a welcome relief to see him leave. I mean, I truly believe he has made America less safe in every conceivable way. So I have high hopes that Donald Trump will actually take the rise of ISIS seriously, will actually take the refugee crisis in Syria seriously, and he's surrounding himself with people like Mad Dog Mattis, who people like me, the ultimate respect for. So listen, there's definitely a new sheriff in town.
All right, we are going to, and he is in town. He has arrived in Washington, and we have cameras, as you can see, on the right-hand side of your screen. Oh, there it is, in front of the Trump hotel there. We are going to be watching this, awaiting Donald Trump's arrival. He is with his family. They just landed, and we will bring that to you when it happens. By the way, Trump started out this day by tweeting, "The journey begins. I will be working and fighting very hard to make it a great journey for the American people." And so it begins. All right, we're going to move on, but we'll keep this. Let's see, this is not particularly his vehicle yet, but we will keep watching this for you. And let you know when he arrives. Meantime, on Capitol Hill, Treasury Secretary nominee Steven Mnuchin is on the hot seat, and he has been for a couple hours now. Democrats grilling the former banker on his record involving foreclosures and his private investments. Meantime, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he's only ready to give clearance tomorrow to confirm General John Kelly and James Mattis for their posts and to debate Mike Pompeo's confirmation. This after the Democrat raised concerns about most of President-elect Trump's cabinet picks and the way their confirmation hearings are being handled.
This is a swamp cabinet full of bankers and billionaires. It's no surprise Republicans are trying to rush through these hearings. They don't want people to know the true views of their nominees, the potential conflicts of interest, and just how many of them come from the top 1% and are even billionaires. President Obama's nominees all had their paperwork in a timely way, and the Republicans were given ample time to question the witnesses, so it's not analogous at all.
Incoming White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer hitting back today.
I think what's a shame right now is to see some of those individuals who we would call consensus candidates, people who they didn't even find a problem with, people like Secretary Elaine Chao, Ben Carson, Nikki Haley, suddenly not be part of Senator Schumer's list that he will work with us to get done on day one. It's disappointing. These were people that are highly qualified, that were considered quote-unquote consensus candidates prior to a few weeks ago. This was not the precedent that was set by Senate Republicans when they worked with the Obama administration in 2008.
All right, Howie Kurtz.
Well, what we're seeing here is a little bit of foot dragging on the part of the Democrats, and this is payback in part for Mitch McConnell and Republicans not even giving President Obama's Supreme Court nominee Merrick Garland a hearing. Sean Spicer's right. Some of these nominees are very uncontroversial and would pass, but there are some legitimate concerns. Steve Mnuchin, for example, a Treasury nominee, had not initially disclosed $95 million of his assets. The OMB pick has a nanny problem, didn't pay taxes. Tom Price, the congressman and HHS nominee, controversy about him being involved in buying some health stocks and introducing legislation. So those would come up in any event.
All right, you're noticing some movement on the camera because we are being told that he is arriving, or at least his arrival is imminent. There in Washington. He's going to be arriving at his hotel, the Trump Hotel in Washington. We've got cameras all over the place for you, both sides of the street, because the motorcade just departed the airport there after leaving New York City just a few minutes ago. I mean, it doesn't take long to get there. But we are awaiting his arrival, and we are waiting to see the entire soon-to-be first family to arrive in Washington, Melissa.
In fact, they're going to the Trump Hotel, and that was something that Sean Spicer was asked about during that press conference before, and he said, shouldn't be a shocker. I think it's pretty smart. The idea of going to his own hotel shouldn't be a shocker. He's very proud. It's a stunning hotel. I don't think that President-elect Trump having a reception at the hotel should be a shock to anyone there. They were trying to make something out of the fact that that's where he's going.
And people are lining the streets, we are told. You can't exactly see that in the shot there. But we are, well, of course, Secret Service and the police have to clear certain areas for the motorcade to get through. But this is what we're hearing from our producers on the ground.
I know that block very well, 11th and Pennsylvania. It was the old post office building, historic, with a big clock tower. Donald Trump bought it or is leasing it from the government, restored it to this Trump Hotel. And I think maybe it's time to move away from the notion that any time Donald Trump goes to any property of his that he's just engaging in branding. He's about to be president. He probably has some
Howie,
important
but you have to concede that after tomorrow, once he takes the oath of office at noon tomorrow, January 20th, his ownership of that particular hotel becomes a massive potential legal problem for him because of the emoluments clause.
Why?
Because of the emoluments clause, and not just because of that, but because of the fact that that lease specifically says very clearly that nobody owning that hotel can have any federal job whatsoever. He's the president of the United States, and that particular property, not any other property, but that particular property is by ethics lawyers from both the Clinton, Obama, and Bush administrations all concede that that is a massive problem for him. He should move away from that hotel.
So he has brought, as we saw in that press conference last week, he brought a lawyer up to the podium to explain exactly how he intends to not have any conflict of interest. But that being said, I want to keep the spotlight on this moment because we are waiting the first family. Inauguration activities are going to begin right away for the family. Donald Trump will be attending a leadership luncheon with transition officials and incoming staff at his Washington hotel, as we're discussing. He'll also be attending a wreath-laying ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery and making an appearance at a concert at the Lincoln Memorial, I was seeing. That's going to be a big day, all ahead of all the festivities that begin early tomorrow morning. Meghan McCain, your thoughts as we watch the arrival of the president-elect?
It's just nice to see a Republican win, honestly. I didn't think I'd see it in my adult lifetime. I've been through a lot of losses, spent a lot of election nights on, different intervals as well, crying, and I'm just so happy that people like Mad Dog Mattis are going to be in power. Again, I'm a foreign policy girl, meat and potatoes foreign policy girl, and anything that is not letting out Gitmo terrorists, giving clemency to traitors who release all our international secrets, anything that is not Obama, for me, is a welcome change. I'm just glad it is the House, Congress, Senate, presidency. I'm just glad to see real change finally come to Washington.
But Meghan, you can't possibly agree with this guy's foreign policy on Russia and issues of that ilk. I mean, you can't, and I know you don't. So
anything, but you know what? But Putin gained strength and power, and the Syrian refugee crisis raged out of control under Obama. And I'm hoping with Nikki Haley, what I saw yesterday during her hearing, and with people like Mad Dog Mattis surrounding him, and quite frankly, people like him listening to people like my father, which he is, he's been calling him, I hope he's